All good to go.
All right. Let's call the beginning of our Watershed Erosion Task Force meeting for July 12th, 2023. Who would like to do the roll call? Is it you, Joe? Trev? All right.
Member Bartlesmeyer.
Here.
Member Delonte.
Here.
Member Sturman.
Here.
Member Berger. Member Patton. Member Bramman. Member Donaldson. Councilmember Edens. Co-chair Farmer.
Here.
And co-chair Holthouse. Thank you.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us here this evening. We've got a couple things to discuss. Some things certainly less exciting than other things. But I guess we can get started. Carol, you got anything you want to add?
I'm sure we're all discouraged by the news that what we thought was finding some funding for critical mitigation was hit with the line item veto pen, but we've been slogging along for a long time, doing what we can do, and we've got a lot of good efforts that are under our control. So let's just keep going, and sooner or later, we've got to believe one of these things is going to fall our way.
All right. With that, we come to the approval for meetings from minutes from our May meeting. If anybody would care to make a motion to approve them, or if anyone has any questions or concerns.
This may be minor and it's a moot point now, but I think in the $500,000, am I correct? That also included the city doing a match of $150,000. Yep.
Those line item vetoes are tough.
So other than that, I would move to accept.
Mr. Sturman, anybody care to second? Perfect. All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes from our last meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? Righty, one abstention. With that brings us to public comment. I'm not sure if anybody in the audience, there's a few guests this evening, care to speak, but if so, Travis will give you, we'll call you up and we'll get started. Try to keep it to about 5 minutes and we'll have a good time.
Thank you, Mr. Co-chair. Ms. Murphy has turned in a comment card to speak.
Okay. Thank you for having me tonight. My name is Carol Murphy. I'm a resident of the Highlands of Wild Horse, and I've been a resident for 22 years. I'm also a licensed home office in the city of Wildwood, and work as an environmental consultant and an environmental engineer, and have done so for the 22 years that I've lived in the Highlands of Wild Horse. I've attended several of the meetings of this task force, mostly just listening in on the Zoom calls, particularly because it's, was happening during COVID time, and really didn't speak up, but more was listening and learning and seeing what this task force was doing. I've also attended the annual Highlands of Wild Horse homeowners meeting, where Lauren, our city representative, has presented the results of the activities of the task force over the past several years. My primary purpose for attending the meeting and speaking to you today is to bring attention to this committee my concern and the concern of the residents of the Highlands for the need for urgent action to address erosion in the Highlands neighborhood. We're extremely concerned that the continued and apparent accelerated erosion will significantly impact property values and the safety of residents in the neighborhood. While we understand that we are not the only property being impacted by Fox Creek erosion, and we empathize with all the other citizens in the city of Wildwood that are also being impacted by this issue, we'd like to ask the city to consider taking action to stop further erosion as soon as possible, even if it involves a temporary solution until a more permanent solution can be achieved. We understand the complexity of the issue, but we also believe that action should be taken as soon as possible to prevent damage to property infrastructure and ensure the safety of our residents. At this point, to speak to the safety issue, the erosion in the common ground area has created a sheer drop off. I don't know how many feet it is, but it's a pretty significant drop off whereby if children were playing nearby, they could get injured, they could fall off the edge. And it's very difficult to see the edge when you come up to it. Before the erosion, there was significant vegetation that blocked the entrance to the creek. So children couldn't access it. And where the creek could be entered, there was a more gentle slope down to the creek. We understand, as you said, that the city has allocated funds to address erosion, and we would like to ask the city that at least some of those funds be used to address the erosion in the Highlands as soon as possible. To demonstrate the severity of the issue, I don't know if this is allowed, but I did bring some photographs. These are aerial photos, and one of our residents will speak to this in a little bit. But these photos show, the aerial views show, I believe, an aerial view from 1996 and an aerial view from 2022. The other photos are just ground photos of a more recent within the past year of what it looks like. In addition to bringing our concern to you, I'd also like to bring forth some questions that have come up during our neighborhood meetings. And I'm just going to list them out. They don't need to be answered tonight, but I just like to throw those out there for consideration. First question is, what is the city's budget to address the erosion, and what portion of it will be used to address specifically the issues in the Highlands? Number two, who has jurisdiction for the work to be performed in the creek? As residents, we've discussed, hey, maybe we could go plant some grasses or something to do, a temporary fix, at least to prevent this from continuing to happen. However, as an environmental engineer, I understand you've got the Army Corps of Engineers, you've got MDNR, you've got EPA, you've got the St. Louis County, you've got the city, you've got the state. There are environmental permits required. And so my understanding is you can't just go start digging in a creek and changing the course of a waterway. It is a waters of the US. So there are, I assume, regulatory permits and jurisdictions that would be, that would take, need to be taken into account. Has the city researched engineered solutions to prevent further erosion in the meantime, while a more permanent solution is being developed? And what is the current timeline and budget to reach a final solution? I'd like to thank you for the work that has been performed to date by this committee, and we look forward to your responses. And just to close, I would like to emphasize that we do have gratitude to the city, because we understand that you guys understand the issue. You have created this task force, and we understand that you've been working towards the solution. But we do want to demonstrate the urgency. Thank you.
Thank you. Travis, I see somebody
Mhm.
with their hand up.
Mr. McClellan is on his way in.
Hey, great. Can you everybody hear me?
All right, Mr. McClellan, you can go ahead.
Super. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me. Again, my name's Mike McClellan. I'm a resident in the Highlands. Carol did a great intro, and all that I'm here to do is just to kind of add more understanding to the topic we're speaking about, and bring some content to it all. So I'm going to try to see if I can share my screen and trying to understand how to do that. I got video of share content. Let's see if I can do a screen. Here we go. All right, start broadcast. And this is really just adding to what Carol has already passed out here. So I just wanted to explain to everybody kind of what we did here, just as an investigation. So this is a Google Earth Pro. It's got some advanced features. I'm sure everybody there has played around with something like that. So what I did is there's a feature in there where you can go back over GIS systems that the city has and things like that. So anyway, just to understand the magnitude, because there's perception and then there's data, and we all understand that. So we were trying to understand just how much this is growing or changing over time. So for starters here, this is right in the dead center of the screen is kind of the neighborhood center right there where the creek is kind of encroaching in the area we're talking about. So step one, all I did was I went in and added lines. And by the way, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I added lines to just confirm where the roads are to make sure nothing's changing with the imagery. And again, I'm not going to claim to be a professional at this, but this is, I'm just explaining how we kind of came about this, and then we could decide what to do later. So then based upon that, I drew those lines in there, and then I'll flash up some imagery of 1990 and remove today's image. And in 1990, the roads, you can see they're still overlapping. So the imagery is still, correct photogrammetry, whatever you want to call it. So then I went in there and attempted to trace in the Cox Creek the best I could to the bank, again, just to understand how that appears. And then basically, you can see, I'm going to zoom into, let me turn back on the current Cox Creek image. And this is current day, March of 2022. And I'm going to zoom into the area that matters. Now that I've kind of explained why we think that the images are more or less correct. You can see right here, let's focus on this area right here. That is, again, I'll turn off current day. And you can see this is where we believe the creek is. But then if I go through time, I'm going to go to 1996. I'm going to go to 2002. I'm going to go to 2004 before the Shepherd Road move occurred. And you can see quite a big jump right in this time period here. 2005, 2016, I jumped ahead quite a bit there. You can still see the difference there. 2016 after MSD had done some work there. 2019, it's hard to judge, but it's still progressing a little bit. 2020, 2021, and that brings us to the current latest photography that Google Earth has, which is 2022. So that's kind of the methodology behind the whole thing. Then the other thing is we went in there using Google Earth, and this is a little bit revised here and there, but more or less you can see today it's measuring approximately 57 feet from that point. This is again using the tools in Google Earth Pro, take it or leave it, And then if I go back to the 1990 image, it's more like 97 feet. Okay, so with that being said, I took measurements along all points in time, and I'm going to go to this image right here. If you can see that. And you can see from 1996 on my graph on the left-hand side, March, and it skips a bunch of years to 2002, 2004. And then for the most part, it tracks every year all the way up to 2022, that last picture I had. In an attempt to get the best measurement we could from back in 96 at 91 feet, all the way up to today at 56 feet, and then plot that over time to see, how's this thing progressing? This is kind of what that looks like. And as you can imagine, we could slice and dice that different ways and show percentage of change and whatnot. But I guess one key point that I could leave you with is that the time span from these two images right here are 18 years, okay, from 2004 to 2021, or 2022, rather, March 22. And that difference is 15 feet. So, it's not quite a foot per year, but it's nearly a foot per year in erosion. And that's kind of the two different images there. So that was my only point in talking, is just to try to make sure that everybody understood. We supported what Carol had just explained about the neighborhood with some data, and kind of give you guys a sense of what's going on with that. And then the last thing that I will share is let's see here, Facebook. We've got some images here. If you guys can see this is just some images that some of the people, oh dear, yeah, that's me. Please let me log in. No. Well, guys, I'm sorry, I don't mean to waste your time. Apparently, we have some images and videos of kind of showing the flooding, and I won't waste the group's time. If I can log back in here, I will try to do that and show it to you. But it's kind of dramatic, right? We've all seen flash floods and stuff like that. So basically, that area that we're showing, there's a change point kind of around those tennis courts and around the creek and stuff like that. It's just tearing through there, and obviously that's how that's changing the landscape of things. So. Are there any questions?
No, thank you for, putting in the time and energy to do that. That's certainly something
Yeah.
in an area that we've, spent some serious time focusing on.
Yeah.
And it's a similar reality to a few other places that we have along the route there. So part of what we're doing with this study that the USGS is doing is helping us to understand we can tell where areas are bad just by the way that they look, but where are they actually really bad and how are these things moving? That's kind of what we're working on with that. So we appreciate the hard work and the imagery, and we're certainly very well aware of it. Mr. Vunich.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if the gentleman would like to share that information with the department, we'd sure like to have it.
Sure. What's the best way to send it? Email or?
Yes, email would be great. And it's just joe@cityofwildwood.com. Thanks.
I'll write that down. joe@cityofwildwood.com. I'll send you over some files. Thank you.
Yeah, he lives in, yeah. All right. Does anybody else? I see one more hand up. Lauren Ramlet, Travis.
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can.
I apologize about the picture. I don't know whose 3 dogs those are, but they're definitely not mine. I'm a member of the Highlands as well with Mike and Carol, and I just wanted to pop on and again say thank you. I don't have as much insight and knowledge as the 2 of them have, but I just wanted to express my concern and share my appreciation with you all for making the efforts to try to help come up with some sort of a solution or some additional information. So again, just wanted to say thank you for your time and consideration here.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, before we move on, I think I can answer a couple of your questions pretty quickly. So this year in the budget, we were able to move $750,000 into our watershed budget, basically is what we're calling it. And that would encompass repairs, engineering, this USGS study, all of these different components. And it's something that we've been working on, obviously, for several years. This was the largest amount of money that we had. And then unfortunately, well, for a few moments there, we thought we were going to get an extra $500,000. And unfortunately, the governor opted to veto that out. So we were looking very forward to possibly being able to do a little bit more than we were hoping to do this year. But at the moment, that doesn't look like we're going to be able to do it. You are correct when it comes to the jurisdiction. There's a bunch of them. Pretty much all of the ones that you listed are down there. We've been working with the Army Corps of Engineers now for, I think it's like 18 months or something, right? About a year and a half to get the permits moving forward to be able to start doing things in the creek. That is a very long and somewhat tedious process. And so we started that. It's one of the things we've done the last couple of years is to try to be shovel ready as soon as we have the money to do a project. And then the last piece of it, also you're correct, you can't get into the creek and dig things up and plant things. What you can do, and one of the things that we've been working on trying to put together, is to try to secure the bank, at least the upper part of the bank, with grasses, trees, more hardy plants that will last. It's obviously difficult when areas are flooding and it takes time for those things to grow. But as much of that as we can do, we try to do. Another few subdivisions, I'm in West Glen Farms included, is to stop cutting the grass right on the edge of the water, so to speak, or the creek, come a few feet back, let sort of nature reclaim that a little bit. It helps to give a little bit of support to the surrounding area, not a ton, but it's certainly better than nothing. And then, when it comes down to allocating what budget we have, we've worked very hard to get to the budget number that we do currently have. And now we're trying to figure out, where do we get the most impact and how do we do that? Doing temporary fixes. What we've learned over the several years is sometimes often doing those creates another problem down the road that it just is like you're in a constant cycle of defeat, so to speak. but there are some things that we're trying to do to try to shore some areas up. And I can tell you, and you could probably, I think, find it online, the USGS study results that we got at the last meeting, if I remember right, are really informative about where along the creek there is kind of an accelerated amount of erosion. The Highlands is included in that. So if you want to get some other data on some other points and look and see what's going on, I would encourage you. It's not the world's most exciting thing to read, but I would encourage you to check it out. And of course, if you have any questions, you can email myself or Carol or Joe or anybody, and we'll try to help you out. Lauren is always a great support and advocate on these things as well. So I hope that helps. I wish I had some better news, but we're working on trying to get some more money. That's for sure. And that's the thing we need. So not that we have a huge audience tonight, but one of the things that I would suggest is, send an email, make a phone call to your state representative and let them know how this impacts you directly. Because unless you're standing in the creek or you drive by it every day, you really don't see that the issue is what it is. And the good news for our city, at least, is for, I don't know what it's been now, 4 years, we've been trying to sort this thing out. Most cities haven't even started to try to figure out what it is. So hopefully we're a little bit ahead of the game once we can get some money to do it. All right. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to add that we had a really, we had 90 different reports of residents that said, hey, this is really serious in my backyard. So, what we have tried to do is have a very objective and rigorous process of prioritizing those and saying, what's important. And the Highlands has bubbled to the top of that list. But one of the other factors we're considering is sort of a tiebreaker being, if you can solve problems upstream, that may solve not only the upstream problem, but also help downstream. So if you come upstream from the Highlands, if I've got my maps of wildlife correctly, you get to Strecker and Clayton. And there's a detention basin that's failed there. There's a triple meander that de-energizes the stream a lot. And one of the reasons that that's been a very high priority focus is it's compromising potentially that progression you were talking about towards pools and tennis courts is towards Strecker Road at that location. And the fear is also if that triple meander were to break through, everything downstream, including the Highlands, would be impacted. So, it's just, and to some degree, it's been a little bit of a moot point because we haven't had the money to really come at any of them. But we certainly are very aware of the problems you've got, understand they're significant, doing our best to find some money to fix them. But I'd echo what Joe said. I think, what we are finding that's, I think, within the control of even individual homeowners and subdivisions is to just retain the water, slow it down getting to the creek. So the more you can plant something, put some grasses in, and we're again looking at whether we can retrofit some detention basins. So, those kind of things don't need permitting and maybe are something where you can start, if you've got that 60 feet, let's buff that up with some, vegetation that might help stabilize it would be. Not to try to make it say it should, it's your problem and not ours, but just to say if you're really looking for something you can do and can control, that might be a suggestion.
One other thing I think that would be worthwhile for us to look at, and maybe we've started this already, I can't recall, is I do remember the MSD project that kind of went in that general vicinity. It might be worth a glance to figure out if and when these more accelerated issues in that vicinity started, because while we try to work very closely with our friends at MSD, they are in a similar boat to us where their claim is they have no money to fix these problems, although it is their responsibility to do so. So we're kind of in a little bit of a circular firing squad with this thing, but that was a big project that went in there and that certainly rerouted a few things, I would imagine. So it would be worth looking to see when that real acceleration started and perhaps having a conversation with our friends there about it might be worthwhile. All right. Anybody have anything else to add on any of the public comment? Yes, ma'am.
I do. Just a thought, because we're in such an extreme drought, we're losing a lot of vegetation. So I was thinking maybe if you went, I know you have a nursery really close to you. I can't think of the name, and also Passiglia, a great great resource, both local businesses. Talk to them and see what might help you with erosion, at least temporarily. Give it by a little time.
All right, moving on. We've got our fund accounting and project options.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Co-chairs and members of the task force. I'd like to just start with a couple of overarching statements. First and foremost, anything that is provided in the memorandum tonight does not deter, detract, or otherwise redirect our efforts with regards to the retrofits of the 7 basins that have been identified in the upper reaches of the Cox Creek watershed. That project is far along, as you know, from our efforts over the course of the last year. And I just want to emphasize that we're not playing a shell game here. We're not basically looking at additional projects at the expense of one. We're looking at, from the department's perspective, 3 projects. And first and foremost is the retrofits. We've invested too much time and resources. And for the most part, we're getting very close to having the information to know if that's a solution or not. Secondly, the recommendations presented to you tonight relative to projects are those of the departments. Obviously, as the task force members, you have the final say-so on those. But from the perspective of the departments, we hope as we present the memorandum tonight very briefly, you'll see the logic behind the selection process and why we think they're solid projects to proceed forward. The last of those overarching statements from the department, I think Co-Chair Farmer kind of identified. We've been at it for 35 meetings. If you do the calculation, we're working on our 4th year as a group. I'm sure many of you, when you signed on, didn't think we'd be at this point for almost 4 years later. But as has been identified, understanding the problem took much longer than we thought, because there was I think, an optimistic view on the part of at least the Department of Planning that with all the things we did with our natural resource protection standards, the grading code, the tree preservation and restoration code, dialing down the zoning densities almost everywhere in the city, that we were doing the appropriate steps to manage stormwater runoff and address our erosion problems. Unfortunately, Mother Nature's kind of stepped in and ramped up what we see in terms of storms. And those storms oftentimes exceed the design capacities of almost all of our stormwater management systems. So we've got a problem. So from that perspective, please know that we understand. So as you found out Friday, that $500,000 that we were counting on back in June when Mr. Lee, our then interim city administrator, now city administrator, had described, was vetoed by the governor in the 11th hour of the process or the upcoming fiscal year for the state of Missouri. Obviously, from the department's perspective and the task force, we could recoil, just basically say, we'll stick with what we're doing in terms of the retrofit of the basins and we'll wait till next year. But I want to kind of emphasize, we started the year, as Co-Chair Farmer mentioned, with $750,000. That amount was not by accident. We did that with the acknowledgement that we are submitting 5 grants to the state of Missouri for ARPA money. And as part of those 5 grants, each of them had a local match. And if you took the local match from those 5 grant applications, it roughly came to about $750,000. We've spent, as the table represents, about 200 or 250,000 of that amount. And I'm a little, I explained to Co-Chair Farmer before the meeting, we're still trying to figure out the payment schedules with the USGS. Some of those may have come out in 2022 as part of that budget pie. And so we probably have a little bit more than what the memorandum indicates. To me, that tells me that we have an opportunity. And that opportunity is to look at the 6 projects that have been identified by the task force, presented to city council and say, what can we do? Where can we start with a project or projects? Again, noting we're not abandoning the retrofits. So tonight, the logic behind the process is explained in the memorandum, but quite frankly, if we were to tackle the triple meander, and you have to do the detention basin with the triple meander, you can't separate the two. We don't have enough money, nor probably will we have enough money in the next year, 2 years, or 3 years, quite frankly. It's at $3 million in 2021 dollars. So from that perspective, I've been told probably ought to consider another 20%. We're probably somewhere at 3.6 million. So taking out the first two, the department's no genius. We looked at the next two priorities, and that ended up being the tributary near Evergreen Forest Court and Cox Creek at Highlands at Wild Horse. Those were our next two highest priorities. Fortunately, too, they are also some of the lesser expensive priorities on the list as well. Now, doing the math, you see that the department identified there is a shortfall. It's over $300,000. But I will explain to you that if you all were to endorse those two projects tonight, and they went to city council and the city council followed suit and endorsed them as well, we're months and months away from being able to do anything in the creek, so to speak. The reason I say that is we have an approval process. It starts here with all of you, and hopefully at the end of tonight, we'll have direction, both the Department of Public Works, Mr. Ron, Travis, and I, and the rest of the team members. Then it goes to city council. And at city council, the department will be asking for an endorsement to proceed forward and do the RFQ to begin the process of engaging the appropriate engineering firms for the design, engineering, and bidding. Once we get that information, it's got to come back to you as the task force to ensure that we pick the right company to do the right work. Once you've endorsed that, it goes back to city council, and basically we proceed forward with the bid process. We select we hopefully get a good number of bids, competitive bids. Those come back to you, then to city council. Ultimately, I would probably offer, just on the conservative end, these are 2024 construction projects. But we have enough money to proceed forward with that engineering and bidding. Mr. Ron, and through his supervisor, Rick Brown, our director of public works, I asked them to just kind of check on what I was doing in terms of this memorandum. And I think they feel comfortable enough not to basically stand up and say it doesn't work. So tonight, what you're doing is taking that first step, but a very important first step. What you're saying is these two projects in the creek, again, with retrofits, we're going to move forward. And that means that the department then can prepare a report for city council, and then we can get on to the next step and the next step and the next step. I believe that based upon Mayor Boland's efforts this past Friday with Channel 4, just to talk about the mayor's veto, that the time is ripe to basically try to get good information on cost as we go into our budget season, which is this fall, and be prepared in 2024, we start the new fiscal year, to have funds to actually do the construction of all three projects: the retrofits, the 7 basins, Evergreen Forest Court, and the Highlands at Wild Horse. It takes a little imagination and it'll take a little luck, but I think we're at a position where we need to basically say, these are the 3 projects we're going to proceed forward as the task force. They're good projects. There's science behind every one of them, as you know, starting with David Hammer and Mark Meyer, working our way through Joe Wilson and Todd Wagner, having our own engineers, Dan Ron and Rick Brown, and then USGS, looking at it from a perspective that it's unique enough that they're willing to spend almost $100,000 on the project just to understand it as well. So tonight, the department would like an endorsement from the task force that, again, notwithstanding the retrofits, that these two projects that have been identified are the priorities for the remainder of 2023 and as we budget for 2024. I think we have the funds to achieve solid plans, good bids, and construction at a point in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I will add just a little bit, I guess, as the only city council member that's here this evening. I certainly can't speak for my other 15 colleagues, but I do know that within our city, we've spent a lot of time and energy as a council putting together our strategic plan and figuring these things out. We've invested very heavily in trying to get our internet issue solved. And this is the next main piece. And everyone that is on the council to this point has really started asking, like, when are we actually going to do something? So there is, again, I can't speak for everybody, but there certainly appears to be an appetite to get these things working. And we've done a great job. Our city team has done a great job of squirreling away money and getting us to where we need to go and getting the timing to spread out to get this moving forward. So as a council member, I think that the rest of the council will be eagerly anticipating an idea such as this. If anybody up here would care to make a motion. Yes, sir.
I will gladly make a motion. I also have commentary
Sure.
if it's appropriate. So thank you, Mr. Funich, for the thorough overview. I was also curious, given that we do have some funding and there is a lot of upfront work to go in terms of engineering, if we were to get approval to move forward with these projects, is there also an accrual process within the budgeting function? If we were to not spend all of those funds, can we roll them into erosion projects for the next year?
Well, that's a good question. And what I would tell you is that I would hope to capture those funds that are set aside for 2023 so that they do not necessarily go back into general revenue. And then I, for the most part, have to ask for them to be reallocated plus additional funds. So there is a way to do that. And I'm sure Mr. Ron can talk about infrastructure projects, but we've done it with our parks projects. We initiate a project in mid-year, weather turns on us in the fall, we get into winter, and next thing you know that we're stuck. And so, yeah, we capture that money. I think Dan has a better word for it. I forgot it again. And encumber the money. And then we basically ask for that additional. And in this particular instance, Mr. Berger, we'll be in a position, I hope by that end of that budget cycle, which is generally November, early December, to have hopefully some understanding of the true cost. And then that way we actually budget based upon a true cost. And the best way to do that is to have bids in hand.
Yep. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I will proceed with making a motion.
All right. So we've got a motion. Anybody care to make a second? Everybody's going to second. Let's put everybody in. All right. So we've got a first and a second. Everybody understands what we're suggesting to move forward here. Okay. All those in favor of accepting the department's recommendation and pushing this forward to the city council, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain? All righty. You've got your plan, Mr. Beach.
To the task force, thank you for your confidence in the departments of Public Works and Planning. And as I say, we hope to have a lot more information over the course of the next few months. And instead of maybe meeting every couple of months, we may need to start meeting more regularly to basically absorb the information and then get it back out in a form where it's actionable. So thank you.
It's crazy talk.
Yeah. I wanted to hone in for a minute on this idea of we've got kind of our first, I think there's templates, test cases, whatever. And I would hope that in addition to the design and the permitting and construction that, is going to be required to do what's within the banks, that we also, really make sure the USGS, team with their modeling is both providing us, information that would inform our decisions and designs, as well as maybe building into their plans, really monitoring what kind of results we get afterwards. So if this is our test case, we'll have some hard, here's what we did, here's what it was before, here's what we've got afterwards. I think the other places where we may want to really work at thinking about how we can be a collaborative and get better results would be with the property owners and the homeowners association to just say, if we're doing this within the banks, like what can you do beyond that might lead to a better all around solution. And I think we really have to get MSD, looped in so that we don't do this and they come around and undo it. And I mean, at some points it's been as simple as just, it sounds like they say you have to cut the grass, and maybe just saying, what if we don't, and having them go, well, I guess the sky maybe wouldn't fall. So, I think at least, those three additional stakeholders should be involved in our process.
Certainly, and Chair Holdhouse, what I will tell you is your suggestions are well-founded, and I think we can structure the RFQ, the request for qualifications, to ensure that whoever provides responses actually works with the USGS in terms of those responses, or is acknowledging that the USGS will review those responses as well as MSD. The project that Chair Farmer mentioned that MSD did a few years ago, it was a main trunk line for sanitary sewer purposes. And it's, I believe, no coincidence, and I'm not criticizing a brother agency or sister agency, but Wildwood Meadows and Highlands were on that route. And it's two of the top 6 projects. So I just don't think you can play with the creek and not expect to have some consequence or consequences.
Absolutely.
So consider your suggestions accommodated in our process.
Also, and comment to that MSD put a very large water discharge directly across from the bank at Evergreen Fourth Court as well. So the coincidence continued.
Yeah. So I'll just add a little piece before I move on. We've had a lot of conversations at the city council level about, different developments and things that are possibly happening in different parts of the city. And we as a city work very hard to make sure that, we're doing the best that we can with these things. But, just as a simple fact, it really seems that, whether it's MSD or the city making its best effort currently or whatever it is, the data that we're going off of is not the data we should be going off of anymore. Things have changed pretty dramatically in our world. And hopefully we can find a partner in MSD to understand that, sometimes when you put giant pipes places, they're just going to create problems. And then we're just asking for a little help to try to make that fixed up enough. All right, let's move on. Status of our detention and retention basin study.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, co-chairs and members of the task force. As you know, we've been working on this retrofit of the 7 basins, and may sound like, well, that's pretty straightforward, but remember, we started with 92 basins in the Clucks Creek watershed, and then asked our consultants, Joe Wilson and Todd Wagner, to kind of narrow those down in terms of those that would be most suitable from a volume standpoint, and those that could be retrofit based upon safety criteria, et cetera. We ended up with 7 basins, and not so much to my surprise, but the 7 basins are, for the most part, in residential subdivisions managed by homeowners associations. And without exception, we received nothing but positive feedback and support trying to move forward in this regard. So one of the last steps before Todd Wagner, who is under contract already, begins the modeling process of those 7 basins and ultimately provides to us the recommendations, is the survey work. And the survey work, as you can see, consists of about 14 different items that Mr. Wagner feels is crucial to the modeling process. And on Monday night, the Departments of Public Works and Planning presented to the City Council the bill authorizing the contract for the survey work to begin. bill was read for a first time. It'll be read hopefully for a second time and approved at the beginning of August. And the survey work then can begin. From the perspective of this process, I think what we'll see hopefully is maybe just before the end of the year or sometime at the start of the new year, 2024, the results of the work of Mr. Wagner, Mr. Wilson, and now Dorian Engineering with the survey. So just an update, we are still moving forward. We're finally getting to that tipping point where Mr. Wagner can sit down at the computer after he's done all the field investigation with the survey information in hand, start telling us how this might work and what are the best solutions. If there's any questions, Ron, Mr. Newberry, or I are available. Thank you.
Any questions about the basins? All right. Work. Oh, yes, sir.
I do have one question. You present something to city council, is that right, for approval for Wagner to go ahead? Is that right?
In this particular case, this past Monday night was Dorian Engineering. They're the survey company.
Okay. And then what?
So we'll read that. So that's the first reading on
Okay.
beginning of August. We'll have a second reading that
Okay.
theoretically will be approved. So then they will have the authorization to start basically doing the survey work. And then once that comes back, we've continually moved forward with Mr. Wagner on like the next steps to get this thing rolling. So the survey is kind of the next thing where they're going to figure out, you know, the depth, how much is available, how much
Right.
can be moved, all those kinds of
And
things. So
you're
that'll be great.
just, you're as confident about the city council on this one as you are the other.
Yes, sir. I think that we are, I think, again, I can't speak for everybody, but I think that we are genuinely at a point where we have invested a lot of money to try to start to solve this problem. And the other members of the city council are really pretty enthusiastic in understanding how this impacts everybody. And it's a huge, you know, outside of our internet project, which is, I think to date, probably the biggest project the city's ever undertaken. If the numbers are right, if we were to fix this entire thing, this would dwarf that many, many times over. So they are understanding that this really is the top priority for the city now, which is great.
I believe you.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair, co-chairs and members of the task force. Just a couple of updates that I think deserve a little special attention versus being part of the matrix relative to our work program. I was within a hair of having what I would have hoped a draft of the RFQ for the Watershed Management Master Plan. Unfortunately, I didn't get it completed by the deadline, which obviously you got all of your information pretty late for the meeting. So my apologies on that. But you will have the draft of the RFQ for our Watershed Management Master Plan for the August meeting. And we'll go over it at that time, and hopefully with your comments and suggestions and deletions, we'll get that finalized. And with an endorsement from you, we'll get it out on the street, so to speak, and see what we get in terms of a response. Again, just so you understand, this wouldn't be inclusive not only, for the most part, Cox Creek, but the other 8 watershed. And most part, you know that, as Mr. Holthouse mentioned, we've got about 90 different property owners that have identified problems within their particular properties, and they all are not in Cox Creek. So we need to start at some point expanding our view, and I think the master plan will help us in that regard. The permits have been submitted to the Corps, and the Corps is reviewing them as we speak. As you know, based upon your wisdom, we identified 3 projects through our consultant team, and 2 of those projects are the ones you voted on tonight to proceed forward. So we've got a step in the ring already and moving at least what I would consider a pretty good pace. And I believe there was a request the last time to see the permits. These are the final permits, so we did attach them to the memorandum if you'd like to review them. I can't make heads or tails out of them, but I'm sure Mr. Ron can help if you have specific questions.
Awesome. All right. Does anybody have any questions or comments about our permitting and just general kind of update stuff? Okay. It's not ready for action, I see, but obviously, as we move forward with some of these things, we're going to put forth an effort to really educate the public as to what is going on. I know he's on the call. I'm happy to have our new permanent city administrator, Mr. Lee, chime in. But a big part of the reason that Thomas was chosen for this role is he is really good at communicating with people what is going on. And so, we're going to lean on him and get the message from the city out so our residents understand what's going on. And so that when these projects are happening or finished, they can actually drive by and see what's going on and where their kind of taxpayer money is going. It's very important. It's going to be a big component, and we're going to do a bunch of fun pieces with it. So is there anything you wanted to add on that, Joe?
No, sir. Other than on the next topic, the work program, I do just have one item. So
Sure.
As you know, in September of each year, we hold our Celebrate Wildwood event. And it's a great opportunity. I think if you all were interested and would be willing to work a couple hours during certain shifts, that the Watershed Erosion Task Force have a booth at the event. It'd be a great opportunity to kind of hand out some of the information we've developed over the years, our watershed erosion brochure, our do's and don'ts. And as Ms. Holzhaus has asked at the June meeting, and we are working on it, something in regards to just what you might, what a homeowner, if there is a typical homeowner, might want to see if they have a portion of a drainage way through their property, a creek, in terms of best plantings, planting patterns, things along those lines. We could pull that together by the end of September and get your all's approval of its content. It'd be a great opportunity to kind of start dispersing some of that. It's also, regardless of what we may do with the parks and stormwater sales tax in the future, it's a great way to engage with the community and let them know what we've been doing and hopefully build support, even if it's not for potential sales tax, just the expenditure of capital improvement funds over the next years. So I just put that as a seed out there. If you're interested as a group, we can certainly talk about it in greater detail in August.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. I think if we can, and I'm sure we can, arrange power to the tent. I think we did that last time. Especially now that we have a couple projects that by the end of September may be pretty much approved to move forward through the council anyways. We can really use that as an outreach tool to, get some pieces of information out there, and I'm happy to put a little deck together to play on a TV or whatever we can do up there.
I participated in that the last time, and I was really surprised at the degree of interest. There were a lot of people that came, a lot of questions. It was good.
I agree.
As somebody who wasn't there, do you think the stream table was worth the time and effort? I mean, did that draw people in or?
I mean, it's always good to have stuff like that. I don't think it certainly hurt. I think that gathered some kids' attention for sure, and maybe helped the kids be distracted while their parents were talking through what was actually going on. But I think anything, I mean, I'm with Mr. Sturman. I was genuinely astonished at the amount of interest and conversation people wanted to have about this. I had no faith necessarily. I had no idea that people were even aware that this was really going on to that degree. So it was a nice feeling to have many people come up and talk to us about it.
Can I hand out mudslides and attract people to the table?
We can figure it out. So I think, Joe, do you want a motion or something for that? Or do you,
Well, why don't you all think it over? We don't meet in August. I'm
Yeah.
back on the schedule. So yes, if there is an interest and you'd like us to proceed forward, we'll set aside a tent.
Yeah.
And we'll begin the preparation of the materials that you can hand out. Generally, the span of time is from about 11 to 4, about 5 hours. So if several of you want to work a couple hour shifts, we can make that certainly work. And you'll be by the city tent. So if you want to go get lunch or just walk around the event grounds and see what's going on. We can substitute in with some city and city team members to help out. So. Yeah, so if you wouldn't mind doing a motion, we'll get that in. If it's favorable, we'll get things moving forward.
It's towards the end of September. What's the date?
The 23rd, it's Saturday. And
Ah.
it's just a single day event.
Yeah, it's a fun time. Maybe we'll even have a parade. Have a boat floating down the street.
Word of caution with Historic Preservation Commission is doing a float, and we're now looking for a flatbed with a tractor trailer with a flatbed. So
All right.
just
Just
be
a
at the booth. How's that?
It is. All right. I think it'd be a great idea, but I'm happy if anybody would care to, if you need a motion, Joe, to do it.
Yep.
If anybody would care to make a motion for a tent at Celebrate Wildwood to talk about this.
I move.
Excellent. Seconded by Mr. Sturman. There you go. One tent, please.
Thank you.
I think the last thing then is our USGS study extension.
Yes, so again, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, and members of the task force. Surprisingly, about a month or so ago, we got an email from Paul Ridlin of the USGS and noted that they would like to extend the study time period from the end of December of this year, 2023, to the end of March of 2024. The additional time equates to about $18,000 of additional cost, but the USGS has agreed to cover that cost. Given the positives of that in many regards, the department took the liberty to present the amendment to the contract, the agreement to City Council on Monday night, led by Chair Farmer. That was approved unanimously. So the USGS is going to spend a little bit more time in Wildwood. And as you can see, they're looking at some of the things I think came out of our conversation back in May. When we talked about bank stabilization and this and that and the other. And so I saw it as a positive, basically having the study leader, Dr. Leroy here, and the comments you all had were excellent. And so we've gotten an extra few months out of them to basically maybe tie the bow on the package and make everything better. If there's any questions, Mr. Ron works with Mr. Ridlin on a couple of task force outside the city. And if you have questions between Mr. Ron, Mr. Newberry, and I, we'd be glad to try to answer them. But I see it as a very positive.
I agree. Any questions? All right. Well, I don't know that I've got too many closing remarks, other than to say, as an elected official, I can tell you that, when residents reach out, it's not that you aren't looking for other problems in other places, but when a resident is letting you know that there's something going on, you have a tendency to pay a little bit more attention to that. So for anybody listening or in the room or whatever, with our governor leaving and our state senator leaving, we're going to have some new faces in there. And I think it's important to let your voice be heard. Send an email, make a phone call, put in your phone to make a phone call once a week and just say, hey, look, here's another picture of the back of my house falling apart into a creek. Those are the things I think that will get some attention. And I agree with Mr. Vunich. I think that, Mayor Boland's interview on the news is certainly helpful. We are not the only municipality in the area that's affected by this kind of veto of some of these things. There are others. And so, as we work together with our other municipal partners, perhaps we can come up with some unique solutions to help motivate our state and federal government to help us get out from underneath a problem that is, while it is ours currently, is not ours to make. Carol, you got anything else?
No.
Mr.
right.
Chair, just one
Yes,
thing.
sir.
First of all, thanks for meeting tonight. As the team members here at the city, we can't do this without you, obviously, so thank you. And all I will ask is maybe a little flexibility over the next few months as we start getting these three, let's say, wheels in motion, and that we may need to meet just on the spur of the moment, so to speak, to basically make a decision or two here and there. So we'll do our best to give you as much of the advanced notice. But again, you were great tonight to be here, so we appreciate it. And we'll try to not wear out our welcome, but we'll need you along the way here very shortly. Thank you.
Yeah, I can attest when it comes to budget time, there's a lot of decisions that need to be made very, very quickly. So having our ducks in a row is super important. All right. Well, if there's nothing further, I'm happy to take a motion to adjourn our meeting. Can hang on. All righty. Anybody care to second? Excellent. That is a non-debatable motion. So all those in favor of adjourning for the evening, please say aye.
I.
Aye. Anybody want to hang out? Didn't think so. All right.